Neutralize your rear deflectors. Watch for enemy fighters.
Jason's Y-wing is coming along nicely. We spent the last few weeks cleaning it and getting some of the parts retro-brighted. Jason's struts for the engine modules and the canopy were starting to yellow a little bit, and we wanted to correct that. So we put them through about 18 hours of retro-brighting with some fresh coats every few hours. We started with a basic cleaning that you've seen us do to many of the vehicles. Warm soapy dishwater, Dawn dish soap, and a soft bristled toothbrush. But then there were some trouble spots on the nacelles of the Y-wing. So what we decided to do was spot clean those areas with a little bit of magic eraser. Now some people say magic eraser is controversial because it actually scrapes away a little bit of the plastic. But I think those people have been way too vigorous. If you just spot clean the trouble spots and get some of those stains off right where they are, and then wipe down gently and buff with a cloth, there's no difference to the plastic. You're not doing any damage whatsoever, and the end result speaks for itself. We also used Retro Bright to get rid of some yellowing on the engine struts and the canopy, and we had to apply multiple coatings over a 24-hour period to make it look right. We don't like to use Retro Bright unless it's an extreme situation and there's no other way out, and when we do use it, we use it very conservatively, because we don't really know in the long term what Retro Bright can do to plastic over time. So remember that when you're using it. Use it sparingly and only at times where the yellowing is extreme. As you can see, we've already done a little bit of reassembly. We've got the rear landing gears back in, and we've also reinstalled the motor. Now I put some C batteries in here to test it, and the motor fired up just fine. One of the other important steps that we've already taken is to re-sticker the ship as much as we can. We've gotten the reproduction stickers back on the ship wherever we could get them because we wanted to make sure that we got placement right, which is a lot easier when the ship is disassembled than when it's fully assembled. So we've done that. Now there are going to be some stickers, as you know, that cross over the seam lines, and we're going to put those on last. This is my childhood Y-wing, and I used it as a very convenient reference. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the landing gear assembly, because I went online, I looked on Rebel Scum forums and other Star Wars collecting forums about Y-wing repair, and one of the common problems that people claim is that the Y-wing landing gear assembly is, quote, mushy. They said, oh, the rear landing gears are always mushy, even on the Hasbro re-releases, they're no good, you're just going to have to put up with it. And I remember from my childhood Y-wing, which is untouched, I've never repaired it, it's as it was in 1983. My Y-wing has never had a landing gear problem. It's always been rock solid. I mean, you can see it doesn't move, and then when I set it down, not an issue. So I was looking at this, and Jason's Y-wing landing gears had some serious problems, and I discovered what was going on. This is the sliding fork that holds the front landing gear through the assembly at the front. And as you can see, it has an open end so that it grabs the front landing gear at 2 points. Well, when you slide this back and forth, like so, sometimes what will end up happening is the front landing gear will either pop out this way and become completely disengaged from the fork, or it will pop inwards into this slot, into this rail right here, this slot area. And when that happens, everything gets thrown out of whack. Because this had weakened over time and it had become sort of spread apart, it wasn't gripping the way it should. So I found some dental rubber bands that are usually used for people with braces because they're plastic, which means they won't dry rot easily like rubber would. And I doubled them over themselves. I used the medium size and wrapped them right around the fork ends on both sides, just behind the front landing gear, I guess, mounting area. To do that increases the tension on the fork so that it can't spread apart, and then the front landing gear won't go this way and likely won't go popping out the other way because this will grab it tightly enough while it's in operation. And I found that to be the proper solution. So what you do is once you have this set up the way you want, you slip this through this hole right here. Let me get that positioned. There we go. Slide it down. Let it sit properly, and then we slide this in place. Now this is where things become a little tricky, because now you have to coordinate setting up the rear landing gears with the arms that roll along the fork. The way you do this is very simple, but it takes a little bit of fiddling. First thing you need to do, you do not set this up with the landing gear down. You want to do this with the landing gears fully retracted. So pull it all the way up. When you do, you will see that the landing gear fork has a hole in it. It's a hole drilled on one side of the main lever. There is a corresponding hole on the ship itself. That hole and this hole line up. I expect this was because when they were at the factory, they were trying to find a fast way for people to be able to assemble them on an assembly line. And so when you align these holes together, you can see that the front landing gear is fully retracted. That means that everything is lined up properly. At this point, what you have to do is then put these arms into the rear landing gears, like so, and make sure the rear landing gears are pulled up all the way before you set the gear into the lever. And you want to play with this a little bit. This takes a little bit of doing, but you want to make sure that when you're done, 2 of the fork teeth are visible on the back end. That should be high enough. And you want to make sure that they don't slip or move. As you can see, it's kind of slipping a little bit. I want to make sure that that fork stays where it is when I let go of this arm. And it is. So you want to do that for both sides. So I'm going to slip that right here, slip that right here. I'm going to lift the arm up, rotate that into the slot, and then I'm going to curl it higher and try and set it where it will not move. Okay, that should be where we want it. Now this is what's important to know. You can test fit at this point. You do not have to keep assembling. I would recommend you not until you test it. Take the top of your fuselage and slip it over the assembly, because this will create the tension that you need to test the landing gear assembly. One of the things that I think a lot of people aren't doing with their Y-wing landing gears when they operate them, and this goes all the way back to 1983, they slip it forward and then they think they're done and that's it. And then they set it down and they get that mushy kind of result. All right, what you want to do is when you slide this landing gear forward, you don't want to just set it down. It actually locks if you push it that little extra bit. You'll hear it. At that moment, the entire assembly is locked and can't move backwards or forwards. And you'll see that your gears are fully deployed. And if I push on them, they're not mushy. They don't move. They're rigid. And when I set it down, it's good. Now that we've done all the test fitting, let's take this apart and start putting all the other pieces back on, including the electronics. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to disengage the landing gear assembly, set it flat, and I'm going to lift the front or the top half of the fuselage off. Now we can do all of our build from here. You might have to readjust those rear landing gears again before you put everything back on, but I wanted to make sure you understood how all this worked before I kept going. All right, the first stage in this process after you reinstall the motor and put the wiring back in, as I've already done, is you take this gear. It has a small inset gear in the mold. That goes inside. So let me turn this around for you so you can see. There's a post here for this cog or gear, and you set it in here just like this with the inner gear facing towards the wires of the motor. Then at this point you have this device. Now let me take this off so I can show you the full build. This is the device that I told you in the first part that we don't bother to fully disassemble. You have your plastic reed, which is going to butt up against the motor's gear. So we're going to set this, we're going to orient it this way and set it down toward the front of the ship. Now, This front hole right here, this little inset, is going to go over this post. Just like that. Now all of these gears are lined up, and you can see that they're all connected. You don't want to force this, but you can test it gently. We don't want to strip any of these teeth. All right, so now we're going to get our screws out. There's only one long screw in all of the screws that go with the Y-wing. That's the screw that goes down through this hole. Remember not to over tighten, just enough so that it does what it needs to do. All right, that looks good. You don't want to over torque this assembly. You need it to work properly. The next step involves the post for the turret and the arm. The post slips over this front post, slips over like that. And then you have this arm, which is almost like the arm of a record player. The way it operates is you put the flat end on the disc or the gear on top, the record of the record player, and you put the curved end on the turret post itself. That's going to be your main assembly. So then when you click your button, it all works in sync. If you tried to flip this arm and put it in the other way, it would butt up against this post, and you don't want that. Okay, now we can test fit our cockpit with it. See that the cockpit is not in the way. All right, good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put our bomb delivery arm, our bomb claw back in. That's easy. You just take the bomb arm and you just kind of press it in right here. It's a very simple fit. Now remember, we have possibly affected these rear landing gears, so let's reset them real quick and make sure that we really like where our landing gear setup is. Okay. Always remember before you start screwing anything back together on this Y-wing to test your landing gears. It goes forward, lock it. Solid as a rock. That is not mushy. So I don't know what everyone else is doing online, but they're not doing it right. The Y-wing has one of the best landing gear designs in the whole fleet of Kenner Star Wars. So people who say it's the worst, I don't think they're repairing them right. There, I said it. Jason's Y-wing is really coming together now. We have it fully on its legs. We've got those pesky over-the-seam stickers put back on. It's really looking good, and what's great about this is that we know it's working properly inside, so hopefully we won't have to break into this thing again for many years to come. I just wanted to show you this as a comparison. We retro-brighted this canopy for Jason's Y-wing because it was starting to look a little yellow. This is my childhood original. As you can see, the yellowing is a little bit more acute on it, but it's part of my ongoing theory that yellowing has more to do with handling than it does to do with sunlight or UV rays. It has a lot more to do with finger oils. Maybe one day I'll fix mine, but I just wanted to show you how nice it's turning out on Jason's, the RetroBright process. Now, let's get the engine pieces back on. There's a way these go on. You can see these slots. You want to make sure the slots line up with the tray that the strut will sit in. So I might have to adjust these a little bit. It's easy to slip up on that. That may be correct, and again, it may not. That looks good. Okay. Alright, now the pieces that Jason was missing. Jason was missing the top turret, which we have, a brand new top turret assembly. It's an original vintage, but it's a replacement for his. The bomb, which is in two pieces, and it was meant to do that. It was meant to blow up when it hit the ground. That's very difficult to find. We have a vintage original replacement for him on that. This is an original. It is not a repro. And then we have 2 original chin guns with no stress marks on the base, which is very rare. I like to put them with the molding marks down. So we'll fit those into the front here. And why are you being... There we go. All right. Jason's Y-wing looks stellar, better than I ever would have expected. I cannot wait to send this back to him and see it as a permanent part of his vintage Star Wars collection. And this has been a real privilege for me because I had no opportunity up until this point to see how a Y-wing works inside. So thank you, Jason, for sending this to us and entrusting us with it. I think you're really going to enjoy it as part of your collection. It's just a beautiful fighter from Kenner. I really think it's one of their best efforts. So I hope you've enjoyed this restoration, and we will see you on the next one.